Greetings. Welcome to another installment of Next Gen and Lodging in partnership with Hotel News Now. I am one of your hosts, one third of the Next Gen and Lodging team, Omari Head, founder of the National Institute of Lodging Education. Chris Henry is not here with us today, but we do have Davonne Reaves, founder of the Reaves Group, as well as Vester. We are here to discuss the post-election impacts and what we're hearing from our peers, generationally specific as it relates to what folks are looking forward to, thoughts, concerns, and overall how they're feeling. Davonne, as somebody who navigates the space in a lot of different capacities, as a founder in the tech space, as a hotelier, as someone who comes from an operations background, as somebody who speaks with students, what is the general sentiment that you're hearing from folks about the post-election, about what they think it means for the future of the hotel industry?
Well, that is a good question, and happy February and happy Black History Month. Um, I've been hearing mixed reviews. Some folks positive, some folks negative. Some folks are indifferent. Some folks, they're like, okay, well, I just have to make the best of what's going on. It's emotional for some, with, especially if you're involved a lot in, social media and the news, and it can just be a lot. It was a lot of some tragic events, that happened. And we're not even really 60 days in yet. And it's just been a lot of turmoil, with traveling when it comes to aviation and, with the boycotts. So it's been a lot of different emotions and a lot of different perspectives, from both, the business world and personal world. It's just what you look forward to, with some companies, um, eliminating their DEI initiatives. Again, going back to both the professional and personal, how that can affect. So it's just been a lot of. I feel like it's like something new every day. I feel like by the time this podcast post is going to be several things that happen.
Indeed. We're not going to be at shortage of news with this administration. You touched on a few things that I've been hearing some other folks say, and one of the biggest things recently has just been the aviation piece.
Right.
There was obviously the response as it relates to DEI being looped into a potential cause for anything, which didn't sit well with a lot of people, including myself.
Well, the facts didn't support it, so
that part. But the facts don't always matter, Davonne. They don't always matter. The thing that I get worried about as somebody who's deeply engaged in the hospitality space and the tourism space is that aviation is key to that. Absolutely. So we need people confident in getting in the air and get into these planes. And some of the properties that are listening to this podcast, some of the employees, some of the owners, they might be in some remote locations where you need people, and having something like that happen. And again, it happens periodically, and it's certainly an unfortunate circumstance. And our thoughts and prayers go out to those souls that were lost,
absolutely,
families impacted. But knowing that, or let me say knowing, there being conversations around the administration's kind of approach to some of the cutbacks, and some of the things they cut back could have reduced safety. And what we need is a confident consumer. We always need that in every industry. And when consumer confidence gets shaken, specifically as it relates to travel, I mean, it can be decimating. Yeah. And then we saw what happened, with COVID and people scared to get on planes, and certain locations thrived because they were drive-to leisure. That was the whole conversation of drive-to leisure. So there's definitely been some conversations around that. One thing that I thought was interesting as well that you touched on was, obviously the emotional component. So, outside of where your social ideologies fall, there have been a lot of hoteliers that have expressed frustration over two big things. One, which is immigration, which is
Yeah.
a substantial impact to our workforce. So, when you start thinking about that as somebody who's done consulting, as somebody who is working with folks that are looking to acquire, looking to dispose of assets, and even personally in that. Are you hearing anybody talk about potential fallout from immigration restraints?
I can speak for my hotels. That hasn't been an issue. Um, I'm not saying it's not from the industry overall. I know I've just seen, in the media, again, I don't know if it's factual, but where there are a lot of businesses, depending on the industry, but specifically agricultural, I haven't seen it necessarily in hospitality space, with immigration being an issue.
The agricultural impacts as well. So
Mhm.
I think that that's one thing that we're waiting to see what that looks like. I think the Chipotle CEO has some interesting comments on it as it relates to the potential impact. Obviously they're a huge consumer of avocados, right? So
Right.
what does that look like as you start talking about? And it's funny, as somebody who was a part of the group that was deemed Generation Avocado Toast.
Mhm.
Fast forward, avocados are concerned on
I
top of
love avocado toast.
on top of everything. So our restaurateurs and our select service hotels and our full service hotels that are providing more than just complimentary breakfast that may be a lot of kind of pre-made items, and I imagine that stuff's going to start to go up as well. But I definitely see hoteliers pondering on what does this mean for cost per occupied room.
Mhm.
What does that look like as it relates to us trying to really massage the impact to the guest as,
Mhm.
as we go ahead and get them in there.
Mhm.
Because yes, you have to pass along, to the consumer, and we did such with inflation and historical average daily rates.
Mhm.
But also, it's costing more to employ people now, right? So
Mhm.
you jam immigration in there. I can only imagine that continues to accelerate on the labor side too. So again, we're right at the beginning. Any other sentiments that you're hearing out there? I got one that
Well, I was pulling up this. I'm looking at this actually by I guess our parent company, the podcast, CoStar, or Hotel News Now, which is powered by CoStar. During the recent, probably I guess the first major hotel industry conference of the year, Alice. I wasn't able to attend, but they mentioned how hotel industry CEOs and executives, they see a potential in the new Trump administration, and as you mentioned, immigration was definitely a part of the conversation. Interest rates, of course, and labor, of course. So anything else? The biggest thing is, which I hope it does not. I hope that we are not a part. When I mean we, the industry itself, is not a part of the conversation when it comes to eliminating DEI, initiatives. I
yeah.
was I was talking to one of my industry friends, and they were saying how when they were coming up in the industry, they weren't affected. There wasn't any really DEI initiatives. Um, Coming up in the hospitality industry. And I was like, yeah, I kind of thought that too, because when I was coming up, I think there was a women's group, but it was when I was leaving Hyatt. And then the companies I worked for, I was only Black. So it really wasn't a lot of,
The only Black. That should be
literally
a whole chapter in your autobiography.
the only Black in both companies.
The
So
only
for
Black,
like 4 years. So
like
yeah,
a box of crayons.
literally. So
Except for there's not all the other colors. It's the only Black.
literally all Black. Yeah. And as far as, but that can, affect a lot of the morale.
Yeah.
Because even though we don't have a lot of executives or hotel owners who are Black, we have a lot of entry level folks who are Black. We have a lot of middle employees who are Black. And that is literally the heartbeat of every hotel, right?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't think that the entry level folks are impacted, right? Because at the end of the day, they need labor, and at a certain level, some of these jobs, they're kind of like, do you have a pulse? And
Yeah.
can you deal with this audience? And they're kind of letting anybody, let me say anybody, but they're very open-minded in who gets in. For
Right.
some reason, and we know what that reason is, there's a choke point where when it bottles up and when you get to the top, it continually is the same individual, usually male, usually white.
I
So
think from like the emotional standpoint, right? Like a lot of
yeah,
people are boycotting companies because they're eliminated their DEI initiatives. Like, okay, well, after Brother Floyd was killed, a lot of companies pledged to say, okay, hey, we're going to give X amount of dollars to DEI, and then now it's like, well, okay, never mind. Uh, we
yeah.
gonna we gonna do something else. And certain companies are like, hey, we're not gonna, we're keeping our initiatives. I'm speaking to a couple groups to their black groups, Microsoft and Google. And so I'm still moving forward with trying to create more Black hotel owners and investors. So I'm gonna keep that going until I don't have any breath in my body. You know.
100%.
Yeah.
It's funny. There are folks, and well, this is kind of where it gets beautiful and the work that we both do. So, as an acquisitions consultant, specialize in helping those high net worth Black family offices acquire their first few hotels. There's no impact. Actually, I mean, it's you'll probably see people more interested in getting in the space. And
Mm-hmm.
and we're right because they want to have a little bit more control of their own destiny. And to your point, there are people that I know that are very socially progressive, but they're also like, look, it is what it is. How do we benefit from this situation? This is terrible. This is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely terrible. And I'm not saying that they're 100% in the spirit of never let a good crisis go to waste, but they are absolutely like, there's got to be an opportunity for me here. And I'm a descendant of survivors, specifically survivors of the Middle Passage. So when you
Mm-hmm.
start putting it in that frame and that context, there are a lot of folks that I work with that are just like, okay, yeah, this is unfortunate, but now what? So to your point on the lodging side, specifically in hotels, I haven't seen. Well, we've seen a little bit on food and beverage and the QSR space, some of those cutbacks. But I think that whatever they do change, well, first of all, a lot of those changes started getting made before. There
Mm-hmm.
were a
Yeah.
lot of people that kind of saw where the rhetoric was shifting.
Mm-hmm.
They reviewed Project 2025. You kind of it was a great space to get color on what the playbook is, and
Mm-hmm.
people were like, okay, well, we know what time it is. And even if the election had gone another way, you just know that there's a roaring audience out there that are not in favor of that. And if you're at a publicly traded company, you do have to play it safe. Now, that means that you just may change the verbiage, but I think a lot of them are going to still continue to do the work, and we're continue to see them do the work. Now, that's more so on the entrepreneurship side, on the franchisee attraction and retention of these underrepresented groups. But as you said, as it relates to talent, that's been the interesting thing to watch, right? There was that report that I want to say came out in 2022 or 23, and it was
Mm-hmm.
something like outside of property level. When you got above property level, there was only like 160 Black executives, and this is Black
Mm-hmm.
specific, Black executives that held the title of director or above. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you can argue with the census that they got the data from. I think it was pretty sound, but that's a very glaring number, right? That you start talking about 160 black folks that hold the title of executive or and above. And this was in the time of DEI was a thing, and we realized that there was all these gaps and issues with pipelining and so forth and so on. And it was I think the genesis of it was we can't change people's hearts, but we can change policy. So
Mm-hmm.
now let me ask you this: without policy being part of it, do you think that advancement of these underrepresented populations, specifically in the operational capacities through senior and executive leadership. Do you think that that's going to be impacted under this new administration?
I mean, the way he's looking now, um, with a lot of the shift, I, it's kind of hard to tell, because I think within the first 2 years, I think the answer will probably be yes from like an impact standpoint. Um, and the reason why I say that with the time frame, because it could possibly be a shift in not in administration, but in the House and Senate. Just coming from that emotional standpoint and everything that's been going on with the new administration. I don't think it'll become more diverse, even from a policy standpoint, just from the discussions and what's being done now, right? There are a lot of groups, a lot of politicians who are definitely making their voice be heard. A lot of their making sure that they listen to their constituents and having their constituents out there go out there and rally and do what needs to be done, from a to make sure that the policy, from a policy standpoint, that it won't be shifted in a way that is negative to a certain culture, right, or to a not even culture but ethnic group.
So interesting. I think that my final prediction is that I'm not sure if it has an impact adversely. And the challenge is, and as sad as it is to say,
Yeah.
it was that we didn't have them in place long enough,
Mm-hmm.
at an aggressive enough, approach. They were around for a while, but they weren't aggressive enough until probably like the last 4 or 5 years, and that's not really a good solid pipeline. However, there was something that was very fascinating that happened, and I wrote about it in the article for Hotel News Now. Which was that when the George Floyd incident, the murder did happen, all of a sudden they found all these qualified Black people to join the boards, even the
Mm-hmm.
hospitality cop. So again, it wasn't that these folks weren't around. It wasn't that they were qualified. It was all of a sudden people felt the social pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So is the social pressure going to be there anymore? Maybe, maybe not. Regardless
It
of
may circle back. I think it's going to circle back.
with that pendulum swing, right? At one point in time, marriage equality was a big deal, right? That
Yeah.
was that
Yeah.
was crazy. That was just absolute ludicrous. But like that was the pinnacle of like our evolution as a
Mm-hmm.
society was marriage equality, and then there was an audience that now has gotten louder and louder on a
Mm-hmm.
myriad of topics as it relates to equity and inclusion, that have said that hey, we're not in favor of this, and now it appears that they've become the majority. So I still have faith in humanity.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
Whether or not is faith in the government, I do have. And I have faith in the talents of those underrepresented populations, right? Because
Yeah.
what a
Me
lot of these
too.
folks have shown you is that they come in here, they show up, they show
Mm-hmm.
out, they perform. The data is real. The data, it can't be matched. Specifically, as a Black man in this space that coaches, mentors, advises, equity partners, and students. Like, I mean, I'm talking to the best of the brilliant, the best of the best, right? These are folks,
Yeah.
as are you, right? Outside of gender, outside of ethnicity, as we know, race is a social construct. So when you look at all of those things, I still find a way to be hopeful and encourage. And we want to definitely, as we close out here, encourage our listeners to do the same thing. But the biggest thing we want to encourage you to do is keep the conversation going. The as you all obviously, it's a lot of tension here in the country. It's a lot of tension in your workplace, potentially depending on where you work. And find your outlets, find your communities, find your tribes. Yeah, community is essential.
But before we go, we didn't talk about tariffs.
That was on my list. I was trying to be mindful of the clock, but I'll just close out with this. I'm interested to see where the tariffs go. So we talked a little bit as it relates to the
Yeah.
agricultural piece. As somebody who's in the hotel space, this is where I think that's fascinating. I'm wondering what this does. Does this change appraisals? Because now you technically can argue that replacement cost is higher, right? Because the
Mhm.
because construction costs are going to accelerate. What does this do for PIPs? We saw what it did during COVID and people that underwrote acquisitions and we'll do the PIP in 2 years. We bought in 2018. We'll do it in 2020. It's going to be 20,000 a key. Fast forward, it's
All of
now
my
30.
hotels are up for pips now.
Look, and it's 30, 40,000 a key, and that math ain't mathing anymore. And people are like, hey, whoa, hold up. So now buying anything with the PIP fully completed or fresh out the ground, like, I mean, you can argue that that value is higher because replacement cost has shifted. So yeah, so what are you hearing people say on the tariff side?
Not as it relates to the hospitality side. I haven't heard anything about that yet. But as far as, just, I don't even want to say the buzzword eggs. Everybody, I don't really eat eggs like that, so it doesn't really, But I get
Don't
what folks.
really eat eggs like
I don't really eat eggs like that, so it doesn't really, I see the conversation, but I don't really, I don't. But anyway,
it's the avocados that got you.
it's the avocado. Hey,
It's the
hey,
avocados for
avocado.
me.
That hey, okay. That's a different conversation. The crab legs. Now you're like, wait a minute now, okay. But hey, I'm not because some folks they need their eggs and I get it, so I'm not knocking that. But as far as what I'm hearing is it's a lot of conversation which we all have. Nothing's been truly put in place. When it and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand tariffs and how that can affect the consumer. And so I am concerned because if it really does move forward, if it's an increase in tariffs, that will not only affect the consumer, but that can trickle down to the hospitality space, right? Because if you don't have any additional funds to travel, now what I will say is, and I know we're running out of time, with a lot of mandates of folks going back to the office, how would that play a role from the hospitality space as far as having meetings, having those conventions? Now we're starting to have, is that business traveler that we miss so dearly? Will that business traveler come back because now they're mandated to come into the office or travel to the office, right? So I'm curious to see what the conversation will look like um, next year based off of previous year data and numbers, and how that would support the hotels.
I think that's going to be applicable. Like if you had, Fed room blocks or state
Mm-hmm.
room blocks, yeah, 100%. Even those hotels at the border, right? Are we going to keep building that wall? I don't know. Maybe that occupancy is going to shift back up now, right? Because maybe it's folks down there at those border states building the Great Wall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all of that that shapes up. So we appreciate you all tuning in for this discourse again. Keep it going. Continue to find your audience, find your tribe, have these discussions as it relates to how you're feeling. That's what we actually started Next Gen and Lodging, right? Was to loop in and kind of highlight some of the things from some of our contemporaries that may not feel comfortable doing it in a recorded setting, but we wanted to make sure we brought it here for y'all. So we
All right.
appreciate you all tuning in, and I'll hand it over to Davonne to close us out.
Well, thank you all so much for listening, and thank you, Omari. You're such a wordsmith, and just ask all these prolific questions and stuff. I want to give a shout out to, since it's Black History Month, all of the Black History hotel makers. Omari, you are a part of it. I'm a
Patting
part of
myself on
it.
the back.
So let's pat ourselves on the back. I got to give a shout out to the first person who I really idolized in the hotel space, Miss Valerie Ferguson. She retired, but she was the first, not one, but the first Black general manager of a full service hotel, first Black chair of the American Hotel Lodging Association. And so she's been able to open the doors for so many people who look like us. So many Robert Johnson, Sheila Johnson, Leslie Hale, so many people who are just continuing to open the doors for us. Shout out to all the Black hotel owners. Y'all making history. All the Black investors, because y'all probably the first in your family to do so. So, and I'll shout out to all of the folks who've been working in hotels for 30, 40, 50 plus years, when it wasn't even a time where you couldn't even see Black people walk through the front door. So we thank you all. Thank you for listening in, and we will see you next month for Women's History Month. And we'll have a different topic. So I'll be hosting it. And again, just thank you, Hotel News Now and CoStar, for believing in Next Gen Lodging. And thank you for our listeners. Make sure you subscribe so you won't miss the next episode.
Hi, I'm STR's Isaac Colazo.
And I'm co-star's Jan Freitag. And together we are the data geeks behind Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network.
Every month, we bring you a fresh take on the latest hotel data, insights into the travel trends behind that performance, and the big picture topics you should be thinking about.
And we also don't mind getting into some good-natured disagreement from time to time. Hey, when Isaac and I start talking data together, anything can happen. And it usually does.
Find us on hotelnewsnow.com and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. Search for Hotel News Now, and thank you for listening.
This episode of Next Gen and Lodging was recorded in February of 2025 and edited by Rachel Daub. Look for this and more at hotelnewsnow.com.